Come on in, bestie. Welcome to StoryPod, where we do the doing of story development together. Brought to you by Creative BFF. Hello, thank you for joining me on the StoryPod podcast. My name is Ashley, your host. Okay, creative BFF if you need one. All right. So what we're doing today is, if you've looked through my little podcast catalog at all, something that I love to do, which is to answer a question, a story question. And listen, I would love to answer your story question. That would make my day if I could answer a question for you. So if you have a story question for me, please feel free to reach out. You can email me at ash@creativebff.com, or you can go to my website, creativebff.com, to the contact section and shoot me a message, or you can maybe drop a comment or a DM on Instagram, which is, my Instagram is your_creativebff. your_creativebff. You can find a link to that on my website. It's probably linked somewhere below. But yeah, so like I said, today we're answering a question. It is coming from Reddit because that is where I have to farm for questions right now until you and I become the besties that we were always meant to be. So here is the question that we are working with today. It is from the r/character development subreddit. The poster is Lanky Thanks 4950. And the question is, how can I improve this character arc? I'm writing a story about an older brother, A, and his younger brother, B. The brothers live in a tough neighborhood, so A starts to teach B fighting skills, but doesn't have much regards if he hurts him since it's for his own good. People try to separate the brothers after this because younger brother keeps getting badly hurt, causing older brother to run away with younger brother so they'll stay together. But younger brother wants to go back, so older brother starts locking all the doors so younger brother can't leave him. I've been changing A and B to younger and older, but older brother later accidentally starts a fire, and the house younger brother is locked in burns down. Younger brother is saved by the antagonist, but with burns, and grows to hate the older brother. The problem is that I'm stuck here. Is there any way I can add to this, like how older brother deals with younger brother's supposed death, or how the younger brother copes? So this is an interesting sort of story setup here. I don't know if the events that are recounted in this post are, happening before the story starts, before the audience comes into the story, or if these are the events that are happening throughout the story. I think that to start, in order to answer this question, we need to look to the goal. Like, what is the story goal? Who is the protagonist? Is it A? Is it B? Are you doing like a dual perspective, a dual point of view type of story? Because their goal, whoever the protagonist is, their goal is going to determine the plot points. I think it's interesting that the antagonist actually saved the younger brother. That's very interesting. So you can absolutely explore that relationship. It seems like, from the question, it seems like the younger brother is possibly staying with or living with the antagonist. So it must be that, the younger brother is now separated from the older brother, because you mention that the older brother, a possible plot point could be how the older brother is dealing with the younger brother's death. I mean, it even kind of seems like the older brother might be something of an antagonist himself because of how kind of, saying he was like low-key abusive might be a little bit much. He just was more rough and tumble, I guess, is the way I'm interpreting this, he's more rough and tumble with his little brother, which is dangerous for the little brother, I guess, depending on how old the little brother is. The fact that the younger brother starts to hate the older brother, even as he is apparently separated from him, is an interesting point. But I really think we need to look first and foremost to the goal of the protagonist. As always, we don't know anything about this story. So it's like, we don't know the logic of the world. Is this just like our normal world? Are there superpowers? Is this a horror? Is it a thriller? What is this story? That's going to help determine more plot points. Because it seems like rather than just looking for a character arc, you're looking for plot points for the story. Again, the character arc and where these character goes is going to also depend on how you've developed them. What are their strengths and the weaknesses, or rather positive traits and negative traits, their flaws. That's going to probably help bring in some plot points. But it's really like, I think that what we're missing here, you have a cool backstory, an interesting backstory, because to me, as I read this, and this might not be the case, but to me, this seems like stuff that happened before the story comes in. And so the question is, what is the goal of your story? What are we working through? What's the theme? What are you telling the audience about this? Is it a slice of life with these characters? Like, what could a goal for let's say that the younger brother is the main character. Let's say that he's the main character. What is his life like living with the antagonist? Or if he doesn't live with the antagonist, but the antagonist saves him and pulls him away from the older brother, how is the younger brother living now? Where does the younger brother go if not with the antagonist? Why is the antagonist the antagonist? What are the antagonist goals? What makes the antagonist? Because basically, a very simple perspective of the antagonist, and perhaps there are more complex ones, but a very simple perspective of a story antagonist is someone that is kind of opposing the goals of the protagonist. So what is it about the antagonist that is opposing the goals of the protagonist? Or is A meaning the older brother, is that the protagonist, the character that we're following and whose goals the story revolves around, right? Like, is the goal, once perhaps, okay, so here's, some little spitballing right now. Maybe, okay, so we get the first few chapters are this setup that you provided, right? And we kind of open the story proper on a very distraught and destroyed emotionally type of older brother main character, because he started the fire that in his mind killed his younger brother, right? And his younger brother is seemingly based on what you are setting up here, but it's kind of like the younger brother is all that the older brother has, to the point where he's running away with him because you don't mention any parents or any caretakers. Seems like they're just kind of fending for themselves. Don't know how old these characters are. But if we're looking at teen age or kid age type of things, then, it has to be at an age when people could step in and take I guess technically CPS could be called and take this, separate them or whatever. But if it was two adults, it'd be a totally different scene than if it's some kids, right? So now the older brother's purpose for life is gone, seemingly by his own hands. Because if the older brother's only focus and goal was to take care of the younger brother as well as himself, but primarily the younger brother, so teaching him how to fight, having a couple of jobs, so that they can have a place to stay and eat. You know, what is the situation surrounding the parents and the guardians? Where are they? And now, through an accident that he obviously didn't intend, that purpose for life is gone, dead, according, as far as he knows, right? And so now he's purposeless. Now we have an interesting emotional setup for the older brother, right? So, but maybe at some point, so he's kind of like just zombieing through life, maybe. Or what does he become? Does he become a recluse? Does he become an addict of some sort? Does he, like I said, just zombie through life, barely getting through the days? Is he does he become homeless on the street because he just doesn't care about his own life anymore? Does he get into trouble? Does he become a criminal? Like, what does that look like after having caused that tragedy? And then perhaps a plot point could come up where he realizes, or he finds out, that his brother is actually alive. And depending on the logic of the world, depending on what is happening in the world, now he has a reason to live, right? Now he has something to work towards. And somehow he finds out, perhaps, that the antagonist is keeping him or whatever. So maybe the brother thinks, I have to rescue my younger brother. And so the focus of his life now is trying to find and rescue his younger brother. And, depending on the logic of the world, how difficult that becomes, how many hoops he has to jump through, what those hoops look like is going to depend on your story genre, your world, all that kind of stuff, right? But then say that he does achieve the goal. So here's a story structure thing. He achieves the goal, right? He gets to his brother. He's able to rescue him. And then here is like the gut punch, the dark night of the soul, the twist or whatever. The younger brother hates him and wants nothing to do with him, is not going to go with him, and agrees with the antagonist or whatever the case may be. So that's a gut punch, right? And so now, again, his purpose has been thwarted. So now where do you go from here? Does he fight the brother? Is this kind of like an action story? Let's say they have powers and, it could be a villain origin story, right? Of the younger brother. So now what if the younger brother becomes, so say that, let's say I am a sci-fi fantasy action-y superhero-y type of person. So I kind of like those stories. I feel like those are interesting. So let's take it in that direction. But even if it wasn't this direction, you can kind of still work this probably into any genre, right? So let's say that the older brother, in whatever way works for your story, defeats the quote unquote antagonist, and saves quote unquote the younger brother. But like I said, the gut punch, the younger brother hates the older brother, wants nothing to do with him. And now the younger brother becomes the older brother's antagonist, right? And depends on how large and how far you want this story to go. What is the ultimate resolution of the story? Do you want the brothers to patch things up and come back together in some way? Because perhaps all of this can be moved up earlier in the story, and then now we're moving towards how do they begin to patch things up? What does that look like in your world, right? I don't know if this is going to be like a slice of life, regular drama, family drama type of thing. It would make sense then. It's like, okay, now how do I get back into my younger brother's life? How do I explain these things, the things that I did in order to try to say, try to protect and care for him in the best way that I could, and how the fire started and how sorry I am of that. Like, another question is, does the younger brother have permanent scars? Let's see. So the younger brother got burned, but it doesn't mention if he is disfigured with scars and things like that. So that could be another aspect if you want that to happen. Again, age is probably going to play a role in this. How old are these characters? How what is the timeline? What is the scope of the timeline of the story? Does it take place over a shorter amount of time or a few years? All that kind of stuff. So these are just a couple of possible ideas of where you could take these character arcs. But again, just kind of wrap up, it's going to depend on your story goals. I'm assuming these are your main characters and these are not this is not like some side characters, not a side story. It depends. So kind of trying to recap, if I can, off the top of my head. What is the story goal? What is the goal that we're following? Who is the protagonist? That's probably the first thing. Who is the protagonist? Whose story are we primarily following? Because their goal is going to determine the direction of the story, right? I only gave you one possible way. Like if you want to follow the younger brother, it's going to be a different trajectory, right? Or maybe you see both of their stories separately. But the goal of the protagonist is going to determine sort of the direction, the additional plot points that you bring in. Think about, if you need more story, you need more plot, think about the antagonist. What is the antagonist doing? Because you have one. Use the antagonist. You need to use the antagonist. So we will see scenes of conflict with the antagonist directly, right? So that adds to the story and the character arc, and what sort of obstacles does the antagonist put in the protagonist's way? And then what are some obstacles that come from their own flaws, their own character flaws? Because that's always nice if character flaws and weaknesses and, lies that they believe about themselves and stuff cause obstacles and problems for them, causes conflict. And what was another thing? What was the other thing? Was there another thing that I mentioned where to kind of start trying to find your plot and your character development? I feel like those are probably the main places that you would start looking. So you need to define your story goal. And you'll probably find that story goal once you define who your protagonist is. And you can use the idea that I came up with. Logically, it kind of flows, right? It makes sense that now we're seeing the aftermath of this major event. So like the fire, I guess, could be the inciting incident, perhaps. I don't know. But you know what? I'm not going to keep going on because I could probably keep rambling on and repeating myself, but I'm going to stop right there. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope that this was helpful. The goal, of course, is to help ourselves think in terms of story so that we are kind of like coming up with ideas nice and quick, whether they stick or not. This is kind of like going to the gym and training and coming up with ideas off the top of the dome, off the top of your head, practicing that skill, right? So thank you for joining me. I hope that it was helpful in practicing this skill. I know that this is not your story question, but let's practice this skill together. And so that you can practice the skill, why don't you let me know what you would answer? Do you agree with my answers? Do you have a totally different direction that you would take this? Let's chat. Okay, let's chat in the comments wherever you are watching this or listening to this. But listen, have a great rest of your day. Love you as always. All right. And I will see you on the flip side. You know what I'm saying? I will see you on the flip side.